Why do I say that homosexuality is a learned behavior? What evidence is there that it is self-taught? Well, let me begin like this. St. Thomas, his definition of beauty goes like this: something that's beautiful gives you pleasure when you look at it. In other words, beauty produces pleasure. But what happens when we reverse the order? If something gives you pleasure, when you look at it, the pleasure you are getting from it makes it look beautiful. Let me repeat that. If you're getting pleasure when you're looking at something, the pleasure becomes a lens through which you see the object, and it tends to become beautiful, subjectively speaking. The idea is that pleasure produces beauty. We can relate this to the subject of masturbation. If you are stimulating yourself and getting pleasure from your organ, when you look at your organ, the pleasure makes the organ look more beautiful than it ordinarily does. In short, the pleasure you are receiving affects your mind, affects the way your mind perceives the object that you're looking at. In short, the pleasure you are producing becomes a lens through which you see your anatomy. You are literally training yourself to see your anatomy as beautiful and as lovable. You're training yourself to love yourself. Love a certain part of your body. But how can self-love or narcissism result in homosexual mindset? You may think that your love for your own anatomy is limited to yourself. But the mind operates on what's called inductive reasoning. That's where you reason from the particular to the general. For example, if you meet one Chinese person and that person is friendly and they help you out, and you really need their help, and they come to your aid, well, according to inductive reasoning, you come away and you say, I like Chinese people. What you've done is go from the particular, in other words, one Chinese person, you've gone from that to generalizing, where you say, I like Chinese people and all Chinese people. This is what I'm talking about. You go from the particular or the individual to the general. The same thing happens with masturbation. You, instead of finding one sex organ of a particular kind attractive, your mind sees all copies of that same organ as attractive. By autoeroticism, you train yourself to see that particular type of organ attractive in a generic sense. Now, I want to emphasize that I'm not talking about masturbation, all masturbation. I'm talking about a particular kind of masturbation where you're focusing on your own sex organ. If you instead focus on pictures of the opposite sex, then the effect is not the same. In order for masturbation to result in a homosexual mentality, you have to focus on yourself and literally personify your organ and talk romantically to your organ and basically literally tell your organ, I love you. What happens is, instead of you loving just your own organ, you set yourself up to where you find the organs of other people of the same sex equally attractive as your own. Now, if you masturbate a certain frequency, a certain repeatedly, and with a great intensity, great desire, what happens is eventually you develop the desire to perform oral sex on yourself. Either a man desiring to perform oral sex on himself, or even a woman can fantasize about that. Of course, you can't perform oral sex on yourself. So what happens is, the thought comes in to your mind that you can use someone else as a proxy. Okay, so let's say someone has done what I've gone over, that they engage in this activity over and over again, reinforcing this frame of mind, this frame of reference, and they develop this obsession with their own anatomy, and then they use someone else as a proxy. What they're really doing, if they engage in this, if they act this out, they are literally what homosexuality boils down to is performing oral sex on yourself through a proxy. When you're having oral sex with someone of the same sex, you're really doing it with yourself. That's the drive behind it. I want to clarify what I've said about masturbation. Not all masturbation is the same. Millions of people masturbate without becoming homosexual. I'm talking about a particular kind of masturbation where you're totally focused on yourself and you personify your organ as a person, and it becomes your love object. If you develop this obsession with yourself, the next step is to go and act it out with a proxy, and because it's only with someone else that you can achieve what you actually want to do to yourself. You can perform with someone else what you cannot perform on yourself. But the point is, I'm saying that homosexuality is pure sexual narcissism, and as such, it is not on a par with heterosexual sex. To me, homosexuality is to sex what a short circuit is to the normal circuit or the intended circuit. In a short circuit is where instead of the electricity going the full distance, going out, covering the full distance, the electricity finds a route that is shorter, and it's basically like arrested development. It's not doing what it's intended to do. A short circuit, you could say, is a short circuit could be thought of as a circuit. A short circuit could be thought of as a prisoner of itself. It doesn't. It's a state of arrested development. You could say a short circuit is self-absorbed, focused on itself, and that's also true with homosexual activity, homosexual focus. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, I would still like to hear comments, and also comments from people that do agree with what I'm saying. And also, I want comments on do you accept St. Thomas Aquinas' definition of beauty? Beauty is that which gives you pleasure when you look upon it. And do you agree that pleasure, if you look at something while you're receiving pleasure, do you agree that the pleasure you're receiving makes the thing you're looking at look more beautiful? That's the premise of my argument. I'm going to write a transcript or a summary of this video in the description box. So don't overlook the transcript, please. Make a copy of it on paper because at some point EMP will destroy the computers and destroy the grid, and I'm expecting EMP as a byproduct of Russian attack on America, which should happen when we go into Venezuela. When we intervene in Venezuela, that's when Russia will lower the boom on this country, which is what it has been waiting for several decades. And then Christ will come and reverse Russia's victory, and what happens is Russia bombs America, they take Western Europe and also Eastern Europe, and then they invade Israel with the Arabs, their Arab partners or Muslim partners, because it's not just Arabs, it's the Persians, and they're not Arabs, but they are Muslims. And then Christ will appear in the sky as light, just like in Acts 9, verse 3. and the Russian soldiers will mutiny against their officers. That's in Ezekiel 38, 21, and Zechariah 14:13. And the Russian soldiers will go over to Christ's side like Saul switched sides in Acts 9, verse 3. Then Christ sends these soldiers home, and they become his soldiers. He sends them home to proclaim, quote, God's glory, which is talking about the glory of the second coming, which they have just witnessed. And this grows into revolution against the Antichrist, against Gorbachev. And so Gorbachev will be the one with all the tanks, all the bombs, all the missiles, but Christ has none of these things. All he does is give off light, but he still has the victory. World peace follows, and also world conversion to Christianity. This is in Zechariah 14, verse 9. It says, in that day there'll be one name, there'll be one Lord and one name. It's talking about one name for God, for all mankind. So it's talking about world conversion. Now, how long will Russia rule the world? Only 5 months. That's in Revelation 9, verse 5 and 10. So if Russia takes over Western Europe, takes over Europe in June of this year, which is what I expect, then the 5 months should be over in October, and Christ should come around the Feast of Tabernacles in October, and Gorbachev should be overthrown by early or mid-November.